Have you ever felt like the economy is just one big roller coaster? One minute things are looking up, and the next, everyone's bracing for a downturn. Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on macroeconomics and try to understand the huge forces that are really driving our financial world.
I mean, you see it in the news all the time, right? It just swings from really good to really bad. One day, jobs are everywhere, businesses are expanding. The next, you hear all these warnings about a slowdown. It really does feel like a ride we're all on, but nobody ever handed us a map.
Well, it turns out economists actually have a name for this ride. It's called the business cycle, and it's exactly what it sounds like. This repeating pattern of growth and good times, followed by periods where things slow down or sometimes even get really bad. This is pretty much the fundamental rhythm of our economic lives.
So this roller coaster of ours, it's got four main parts. Now, it's really important to remember these cycles can be super different. Some are short, some are long, some are way more intense than others. First, you've got prosperity. That's the peak of the ride, right? High growth, lots of jobs. Then comes the recession. That stomach-dropping feeling as the economy starts to slow down. If things get really bad, you hit a depression. That's the bottom. A really sharp fall with unemployment on the rise. And finally, you get the revival. That slow, hopeful climb back towards the top. And honestly, trying to understand and manage this whole cycle, that's the central challenge of macroeconomics.
Okay, so how on earth do we even begin to make sense of this massive, tangled system? Well, that is the job of macroeconomics. And while people have thought about economics for a super long time, macroeconomics as its own thing really kicked off in 1936 with a majorly influential book by John Maynard Keynes. His big idea was basically this: we need to stop focusing on the individual trees and start looking at the entire forest. And this quote from Gardner Ackley, it just nails it. It's all about the overall dimensions. Think about it this way. We're not interested in the price of a single cup of coffee, but the general price level for, well, everything. We're not looking at just your income, but the entire national income. So in short, macroeconomics is all about the big picture, the whole system zoomed all the way out. All right, so how does this giant economic machine actually run? To figure that out, we've got to pop the hood and take a look at the basic wiring. Luckily, economists have this really neat little model called the circular flow, and it shows us the hidden paths that money and resources take as they zip around the system. So, in the simplest version of this model, you've got just two main players. First, there are households. Yep, that's you, me, everybody. We're the ones who own all the factors of production: our labor, the land, the capital, all that stuff. And then you have the firms, the businesses that hire all that stuff from us to produce goods and services. So how do these two interact? Well, it's a simple but really powerful cycle. It starts with us, the households, providing our labor and capital to the firms. In return, the firms pay us an income, wages, rent, profit. Then, what do? We take that income and we spend it on the goods and services the firms make. And that spending becomes the firm's revenue, which lets them pay for more labor and capital, and the whole cycle just keeps going. It's like this never-ending dance, with resources flowing one way and money flowing right back the other. Okay, so now that we've got the basic wiring down, we can start to see what happens when a wire gets crossed. For example, what happens if way too much money gets pumped into that circular flow? Well, that's one of the main ways we end up with inflation, a situation where prices just start to spiral out of control. And according to G. Ackley's definition here, inflation isn't just your grocery bill going up once. The key words are persistent and appreciable. That means it has to be a sustained and noticeable increase across the board in the average price of pretty much everything. But here's the thing. Not all inflation is created equal. The speed at which prices are rising, man, that is everything. It's basically the difference between a minor headache and a full-blown economic heart attack. So, at the low end of the scale, you've got what's called creeping inflation. This is a slow, almost unnoticeable rise in prices, less than 3% a year. Believe it or not, most economists see this as a pretty healthy sign that the economy's growing. It's kind of like a gentle, warming breeze. Then things pick up a bit. We get to walking inflation, where prices are going up somewhere between 3 and 10% a year. Now that gentle breeze has turned into a pretty brisk wind. The economy's starting to overheat, and you see people rushing to buy stuff before it gets even more expensive. And then you have hyperinflation. This is where the whole thing just goes off the cliff. That brisk wind becomes a raging hurricane. We are talking about prices doubling, tripling, maybe even going up by 1,000% a year. Money becomes basically worthless, people's savings get wiped out, and the entire economic system starts to collapse. It is an absolute recipe for chaos. So what actually sparks this inflationary fire?
Well, it pretty much boils down to a classic mismatch between demand and supply. On one side, you can have what's called demand pull inflation. That's just too much money chasing too few goods. But you can also get cost push inflation. That's when the economy just can't produce enough stuff to meet demand, maybe because of a shortage or a natural disaster. Either way you slice it, the result is the same. Prices go up, and your money buys less.
Okay, so we've seen how the economic roller coaster works, and we've looked at what happens when it goes completely off the rails. But are we just helpless passengers on this crazy ride? Or is there actually a way to take the controls and maybe smooth out some of the bumps?
Well, the good news is we're not flying totally blind. Governments and central banks have a whole toolkit they can use to try and manage things. On the monetary side, they have tools like credit control. For example, they can raise interest rates to make borrowing money more expensive, which slows things down. Then there are the fiscal tools, which involve the government's budget. Think cutting back on spending or raising taxes to cool down an economy that's getting too hot. And in really extreme situations, they might even try more direct things, like putting controls on prices.
So when you think about it, we've got this incredibly complex economic machine and a whole dashboard of different levers we can pull. Which leaves us with one last and really crucial question to chew on. Given how high the stakes are, who should be the one in charge of making these calls? And that, right there, is a debate that sits at the very heart of modern macroeconomics.